Hello and welcome back to another Take Two with Therese at Altenew, and I've got a couple of fun cards to share with you, but I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do today, so I'm not sure if you're the same, but sometimes I just feel a little bit overwhelmed and don't know where to start. So this is one of the techniques that I use. I just go through my stamps and pick out some that I think would be fun, or that I haven't used very much, or that I could try a technique on, and that's what I've done here today. So I'm just sharing the ones that I picked out of my stash, and I knew that I wanted to use the vase or the vase fillers stamp set and die set because I haven't really used them much. I love this dotted starbursts debossing die, but I didn't end up using it. But I just thought, well, if I get them out, I know that I can use what's within this group of stamps and dies. I just am inspired by them, and it just helps me to create where I felt like I haven't actually, I just didn't even know where to start. So it's good to be inspired by your products, and I use this technique all the time when I just don't know what to do. But I want to create. So let's get started. So some people are a little bit intimidated by using shadow stamps, and I find them really easy to use as a shadow stamp. It's hard to look at the black outline and visualize it in a color. So one good way to do this is to actually stamp them out in a color, and that just gives you more inspiration. I chose a few really pretty yellows and purples from Altenew today. I think that they're a really good combination, and then I can just add some green for the leaves. I'm stamping directly on some of the spicy yogurt cardstock, and basically this first card I'm creating a floral and leafy border, and I'm not being too fussy about worrying about overlapping. I want it to be a little bit loose because I'm going to be adding some watercolor effects to add some dimension to these images. So here I am working out how which stamp to choose next. I basically just hold the silhouette stamp over my panel because I haven't planned this out. I'm just winging it. I find sometimes it's just better to get some ink on the cardstock and get started if I'm procrastinating. And I need to get these cards done because I've got visitors and I want to get it all done before they get here so I can relax and enjoy my life outside card making and work. Which is, I do a lot of work and a lot of card making, so it's nice to change it up and have some visitors to share some time with too. So I really just balanced out these colours as best I could around the panel, and then to add the dimension I'm actually using my watercolour brush markers today. You could use the refills, you could use watercolour paints, you could use pencils, whatever you have to hand. I just wanted it to be a little bit loose and try not to think about it too much. So I do like these brush markers because the colour's already on the tip, but I don't have to actually paint it out. But a couple of like the purple here and the green, they were just too dark to add directly to the cardstock. I did have a piece of the spicy cardstock off to the side that I'd stamped a couple of the images on to test my colours on. I would always recommend doing that if you're using especially coloured cardstock, because the colours are always going to look different on white as they do on coloured cardstock, although this one isn't particularly dark colour, so it didn't alter the colours too much. And one good thing about using the watercolour brush marker refills, and not very much water because this isn't watercolour cardstock, is that it does dry very quickly as well. So I added a hint of shadows and highlights to the flowers and to the leaves. And then I could just set that aside to dry while I worked on my sentiments. Oh, on the purple, these light pale purple, I just used a grey. I didn't actually come in with a purple for that one. So my sentiment today is from the Crystal Frames stamp set, and I'm die cutting it with the Nesting Frames die set, which is a new nesting layered die set from Altenew, and it's a really nice shape. So I did heat emboss that with some antique gold embossing powder because I thought the golds would go really well with the spicy yogurt, and I did it on white. I wanted it to be a little bit of a highlight. And I've also die cut the next size frame from my actual cardstock panel, and to make sure that I lined that up perfectly on the front of my card, I just held that in place while I added some adhesive and then stuck that within the gap. And then I've added the fun foam to my card panel to pop that up on the front of my card, and some foam to the back of my sentiment. I find that if I try and pop up the panel first and then get the perfect placement for the sentiment or the pieces, like the inlay piece, I can never line it up properly. So by adhering it before I pop up my panel, works perfectly every time. Alright, so onto my second card now, and this time I decided to stamp my flowers and leaves in the same colours, in the same colour inks, but onto some white cardstock. And I did a couple of extras. I wasn't really sure how many I was going to use, and I'm doing the same technique by adding some shading with the watercolour brush markers. I did initially try the purples directly onto the flowers again, the same as I did before, but you'll see I actually didn't like, especially on that big purple flower, I just didn't like how it looked in the end, so I didn't end up using that one. But I think if I had have diluted it down like I did on the previous card, it would have been better. So needless to say, that one went into the trash. Okay, so I do have the coordinating die cuts for this set, which is really handy because they're quite intricate, and I'd hate to fussy cut all of these. In fact, I probably would have stamped half of them directly on the card front if it meant that I had to fussy cut them, but the dies are really pretty because they're cut out in between the images as well, but they do leave that small white border, which is kind of the effect that I was going for, because I wanted a bit of a white look on the spicy yogurt cardstock like I had done in the previous card. And it didn't take long to dry because I was just using the watercolour brush markers paint again. Right, so I did add some splatters, and this is the antique gold ink spray, and I have actually splattered that directly onto the spicy yogurt cardstock, and this piece of cardstock is cut slightly smaller than the front of my card. So the sentiment today, like I said, I was in an ambivalent mood, so I went back and forth between like a larger or a smaller sentiment, and I thought I'd just stamp them both out and emboss them in gold. And the one I ended up using comes from the Flower Vine stamp set. I use this stamp set for sentiments all the time. It's has some really small sentiments which I like to add to a card design. And the other one that I didn't use, the Miss You, is from the Ornamental Bliss. And I've stamped them on some of the gradient shades of purple. It's the darkest one, which is called Midnight Violet. And now I'm just putting all my pieces together. I did move these flowers around quite a bit before I was happy with the placement. And I used this crystal frames, which I die cut out of some gold foil, and it's got some adhesive that I have added to the back of that, and that's just going to make it really easy for me to adhere this to the card front because it is quite fine die cut. I used some foam squares, I used some glue tape, I popped them up. I didn't pop them too high because the panel that I've got on the front of the card is already popped up quite high. It's a thick fun foam, which I really like. And I just pieced all my bouquet together. So you're going to find all the products that I used today linked at the blog, which the links will be in the description below. I love it that I was able to pick out a few of my supplies, narrow it down to just have a few to choose from, and be able to make 2 cards fairly quickly, really, in the end. The hardest thing sometimes is just getting to the table and deciding what to make. So hopefully this inspires you to give that a try, and maybe try out some stamping of a silhouette stamp and adding some shading and seeing what you can create. And I also want you to let me know which sentiment do you like best. I like them both, but the little one won. I've had heaps of fun here today, and if you like this video, it'd be great if you could click on the thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel because there's always heaps to see here, and I'll be back again real soon. Bye!